Hello, world. Welcome to WFHR's Rapids Report for this Wednesday, November 5th, 2025. We send a big thank you to Crockett Septic sponsoring this time for us, so we get a chance to talk to some of our local favorite people. One of them in studio today. We're going to talk with the Wood County Sheriff's Department. We got Sheriff Sean Becker with us. Good to see you, Sean.
Hey, great to be here. You're saying I'm one of our local favorites.
Yes. It's written right here. No. I appreciate you, man.
Was it spelled right? Was my name spelled right?
Say a big shout out to our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media as well. A big thank you to them. Be sure to do yourself a favor. Go to YouTube, subscribe to their page over there, and keep up to date on all the great work they are doing. Speaking of doing great work, I wanted to start right here there with the Trunk or Treat event that wrapped up for you guys recently. How did that go?
Great. I think we had to get stock in candy. It's really cool how those events have grown and people reach out to us to be part of them. I think we did 5 of them locally, and during the weekend, I think it's just a great idea to bring kids together at one location, and maybe that's all the trick or treating that they're comfortable doing with. But there's so many of them that are out there that are sponsored by, the City of Wisconsin Rapids did one that we partnered with their dispatch center, and that was fun because they kind of did City Hall, and it was the first time I did it. I kind of made it a huge Halloween theme where people walk through City Hall, and you don't see that very often, and so hats off to all of our city leaders here in Wisconsin Rapids that allowed that to happen. So it gives not only the kids, but the adults the opportunity to walk through City Hall. And how often does that happen? But other locations throughout the county, we attended. Key Savings Bank reached out. We did that on Saturday, and that was very well attended. And other ones that are, Lola had one at St. Luke's, so she was out there. Jesse Nels, our SRO, did one in Auburndale. Great events for us to partner with, and we appreciate people reaching out and having either our SWAT vehicle or MRAP or just a squad there where people get the opportunity to hang out with us and get some candy. I think they're great community events.
When we've talked about this in the past, certainly all the fun it can be for officers and family and community members and stuff, and our officers don't get an opportunity to have fun or kind of let loose a little bit sometimes and enjoy themselves. This event can be good for that. But there's something that I don't know what it is about this year that has really stood out to me about Halloween, but it's changed a lot since you and I were kids, and yet it's still here. And it's still something we do, and we found ways to adapt to modern times to make families feel safer about their kids going out and everything. And I don't think we do this enough in society. That's a win. We're still doing this. I think that's kind of cool. I think it's cool that it did not take some massive thing or some massive movement or something like that. We just individually as societies, as communities agreed, okay, we're going to figure out how to still do this. We're going to make sure the kids can still do this and everything. And the Trunk or Treat is a big part of that.
Right. No, just with those events expanding throughout the years, I think they're a good idea. And another one, a big shout out to the Rafters organization. They reached out and did a fall fest that included a Trunk or Treat, and Joe Fonte reached out, a good friend of mine, part owner of the Rafters, and we made that happen with our squad, one of our squads there, our MRAP, and that kind of kicked off everything for these Trunk or Treat programs. So they're doing a phenomenal job over there, staying involved in the community. Appreciate what they do, and as always, when people reach out for any community event, we do our best to try to be there, just based on exactly what you said. It doesn't have to be Trunk or Treat. It could be the holiday parades are coming up, and we didn't always have involvement with those, but there's going to be so many throughout the county, and we're honored to be part of them. I can't brag enough about our community and being part of it.
We're lucky. Behind the scenes, we work with the Rafters a lot and know how great they are over there, how much they care about this area and stuff. And it's great to note that whenever we can, because we appreciate it. As much as we love baseball and love what they put on the field, it's so much of that interacting they do outside of that. It goes a long ways. Great to hear. Great to hear the events were successful.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask a little bit about a couple of local, things going on currently and everything. One, in this area, we recently had a couple of homicides over the Halloween area. I wanted to touch on those, knowing that we can only go so deep into them.
Yeah, right. With the press releases that's out there, that's the information that we could share at this point. But what I will say it was a shock getting called at 5 in the morning on Halloween, and our captain Hukaskatter, called me and said, "Hey, it sounds like there's 2 homicides that have been reported in Wisconsin Rapids." I'm like, okay, I'm like, really? And so I came in, and there was a briefing that we attended, and at the time we didn't know if they were connected or were they connected. Me being a law enforcement officer, okay, in Wisconsin Rapids having 2 homicides, it's got to be connected. That's the cop mind that I'm thinking right away. But what we did is, we let our detectives from the police department and our investigators from the sheriff's department, DCI came in, and just watching the teamwork approach work, and for me as a leader, I'll offer suggestions, and support. And it was really nice working with Chief Hostins, and then the special agent in charge from DCI, Shane Heiser, a good friend of mine. He's from, the Wisconsin Rapids area. As 3 of us, overseeing, these hectic scenes, because they're still, we're still pulling information and still trying to, first I could tell you, trying to, once a suspect was identified and then unfortunately got out of our perimeter, we had to do some, a lot of research to find out where that person's going, once he was identified. And fortunately, with those, continued partnerships with law enforcement, not even locally, but then extending outwards, once we had that person identified, you're connecting with the other law enforcement agencies, because that suspect's from Milwaukee, and we knew, okay, that's the direction he's going to be going. So then you're connecting with, basically statewide, all the law enforcement agencies. We need to stop this person on 2 levels. Number 1, for what he is alleged to do, and number 2, the safety factor for our law enforcement officers. We need to get that information out as soon as possible, because he's an armed, dangerous individual, and we want to make sure the law enforcement officers that are going to be or potentially have contact with them, they know, and be aware of it. Unfortunately, with that sharing of information, we were able to get the suspect stopped, or we didn't, but the Waupaca County Sheriff's Department did, and the person was arrested and is now in custody. Very sad situation. He's alleged, I could say that right now, to kill his father, and that. That's hard to just even think about.
Yeah.
I know that there's other factors that are involved and whatnot, but that's a fact.
Yeah.
His father, and he's alleged to kill him. The other situation, it's really, it looks like it was a self-inflicted, and it had nothing to do with the first situation. But, when they're hours apart, you obviously, as law enforcement officers and people that are trained as detectives, investigators, all right, are they linked? And at times we're thinking maybe that it was, but through the hard work and the teamwork that we did, we were able to figure out that they weren't linked, and then it's potentially looking like it might be self-inflicted. But when you have that time frame of them happening very similar, that's kind of what we think. They got to be linked, but it was just an odd phone call to get and to start the morning off like that. But on the flip side of it, you have tragedy here, and the highlight for us is that teamwork approach. And like I said, Chief Hostins did an outstanding job, working with us, and everybody working together. That was nice to see. It was unfortunate to see why, though.
Right. And certainly, I always appreciate the behind the scene, if you will, look at this, and that you can give us on this. It's stuff that we don't often hear.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to know, because it lets us know what's being done, and that there is something being done. It's also, I think, important for people when it comes to, there's been a lot of cop shows at this point in the game. There's been a lot of, whether the reality TV 48 Hours or Law and Order or any of these shows. And it's important to understand the difference there. I think that hearing these details help bring it home to people a little bit more. I am a little curious, speaking, as long as I'm referencing shows like that and everything, we've heard our whole lives, whether it's a missing person or it's a homicide, the first 24 hours, the first 48 hours are the most vital. Is that truly the case? Is that truly how that works?
Absolutely. Yeah. Once you have a tragedy like this, and now you're looking at a homicide investigation, unfortunately somebody's passed due to somebody else's behavior. that caused that death. Now the next thing is finding that person responsible, and again, to highlight not just the relationships that we have locally, it goes beyond that. Because once that suspect got out of our perimeter and was picked up, and we're getting that information in real time, now it's like, okay, who else is going to help us? And then, one of the first phone calls I made was the Portage County Sheriff, Mike Lucas, and like, this is what's going on, and it appears that this suspect is, going through your county and heading that direction. And we knew that individual most likely was trying to get back to Milwaukee. So not only it's Portage County, but that route, people need to be notified. We are on the phone with the Milwaukee Police Department, sharing information there, just in the case of the fact that he gets back to Milwaukee, the contacts there, what addresses where that individual was living, they were going to start watching. So it's a teamwork approach when you have, these kind of tragedies of working together, because if you don't, you really do a disservice to the people. If you have, and I've worked in this career now for over 30 years, and I've seen where, administrations don't get along, early on in my career, and I always scratch my head with that, because nobody's better than anybody else. It's really, you have to work with each other, and I've always had that attitude, and I can say now that being in this profession as long as I have, that that change has been something welcome that's happened many years ago. It wasn't by me. It was by other people that as, we moved through our career, seeing the leadership change and just seeing that teamwork approach is something that I learned from.
We've talked about a number of times the ego being out of, police work and some of these things, and the need for credit and some of that. And it's always noteworthy. It's always great to hear that, especially because we're, getting results much quicker that way, the sharing of information and some of that. And it seems pretty self-explanatory. It seems like, yes, that would make sense. The first 24 hours would be the most vital and all that. But I feel like hearing it from somebody who knows this is actually going to bring it home a little bit more. Actually makes it, logical. And also makes much more sense. See, without talking to you, there's so many things that I think a lot of people might assume just because of TV shows or movie or something like that. Like, for instance, you were the one that taught me that you don't have to leave a crime scene with a pun. I always thought you had to be Jerry Orbach. You had to be Law and Order. You could not go leave a crime scene without making a pun. That's not the case, as it turns out. Speaking of TV shows, the TV show Cops was in town recently.
Still are.
We touched, and they still are. That's what I was curious about. They're still here. How's that going?
Really good. They are going to be here until middle of next week. They've gotten several footage to work with, and what will happen now? They send the footage out to their producers in LA. They go through it, I'm assuming doing some editing, and then they send it back to us. And then we have the final approval what they can use as on an episode. And they've got plenty of footage, it sounds like. I'm looking forward to inviting the film crew back. They've offered, hey, they'd love to come back. I'd love to have them. They fit in very well with our staff. I think I said before, staff was a little bit apprehensive, like, oh, really? And I'm like, no, this is a highlight of you, and how you treat people and how you work together as a team. And they did the film crew did just an outstanding job just working with people and making them feel comfortable. All staff that is any footage, they have to sign a release, and so do the inmates. So sounds like I said, we've got plenty of footage out there to get an episode. I'm going to invite them back, and I'd love to get them on the road. This is kind of a jail portion of Cops, but on the patrol side of things, that's kind of how they started their whole show in the early 90s. So I'm definitely going to offer that to them. If they want to come back, they're more than welcome anytime. They really they fit with us, and like I said, they should finish up sometime next week, and hopefully we'll get to see them again here real soon, sometime next year.
That show had a cultural moment and everything, and you and I talked about it last time, what it meant to a lot of our generation and stuff. Yeah. But I think that it has a lot more importance now, and has a lot more opportunity now to be able to do a lot of what I was just talking about, showing you the reality of the life and the situation, and hopefully maybe even encouraging more people to get into law enforcement, and more good people in the job carrying that badge. It has a lot of advantages to it other than just entertainment.
Right. No, and with this being, focusing on the jail, I think it gives the not just local community but the country an opportunity to highlight us. And I think that's a great bragging moment for all of us to have when you see what our corrections officers do that live here locally in Wood County and how they treat people. I think that's going to be something that is going to be really well received, and I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, I really hope that we get the opportunity for the film crew to come back. It'd be, I think, and it's kind of personal. I've been doing a couple of speaking opportunities at UWSP where I graduated from. Craig Tim, one of my good friends that worked at Domtar, and now he works for Herman Taylor Funeral Home, and he's been an instructor at UWSP for many years, teaching communication. And through our friendship over the years, he was big into powerlifting and announcing meets, and that's kind of how we got to know each other 20 plus years ago. He asked me 4 years ago just to come in and speak about media to his class, and I thought that was really cool. Mm-hmm. I get to go back to my alma mater and just talk about media relations, how it connects to law enforcement, everything. So it's the fourth year, and then you always say something about why I got into the career, and I was being pulled in one direction by Julie's family with their construction company, and then my dad pulling me after graduation to work for him on his business that produced steel racking all over the country, and neither one of them I was feeling it. I'm like, one, we'd have to move to Michigan. Number two, I wasn't really good at construction, good at breaking things apart,
sure.
But I just didn't feel it. And then so it's like, okay, what do I want to do? I remember my father-in-law saying that when we had that discussion. I'm like, I'm thinking law enforcement, and then getting the opportunity at UWSP to have an internship at the Stevens Point Police Department. That was the big hook. But the other part of it was the cop show had started, during that time frame. And I remember, I believe it was 7:00 Friday nights. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was watching, and I'm like, okay. And I didn't know if I mentioned it on last month, but kind of hoarder with things, and I got old VHS tapes, and I had two of the series best episodes from the mid '90s. Still had them, and then one of the guys in the film crew did all the episodes, so I made sure they autographed it. So
that is awesome.
Look at the impact of getting the experience with the Stevens Point Police Department, and then seeing that show evolve really pushed me into wanting to protect and serve.
It's it feels like, especially over the years, you've brought in a lot of people that are about to retire, and I like to ask them about their origin story and all that. And so many of them, well, my dad was, or my uncle was an officer, or something along those lines. There's some history of it. Yeah. It's always really interesting to me to hear of somebody making their own path and starting their own road, especially when it comes to public service.
Yeah. No, my grandfather was a Chicago fireman. Mm-hmm. My great-grandfather was on the Chicago Police Department. And I don't know what rank he had, like commander, way before. I never met him. But, it's definitely in the blood. And then, we've talked about it with, my family. Both my daughters, I feel, are both connected to it. Jordan being a 911 dispatcher for Oneida County. And Caitlin, who's a social worker who works with law enforcement a lot, trying to help kids. Yeah. And then her husband, Dylan, was recently hired as a Madison fireman, and we had him on here before. But it's kind of cool how it somehow connects in one way, shape, or form.
Oh, we're speaking with Sheriff Sean Becker right now with Rapids Report, and with our friends from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Wanted to bring up the Deidre case. I know that we had some information on that we wanted to touch on.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, the Deidre Harm investigation. Our District Attorney, Jonathan Barnett, we had talked to him a few months ago about taking a look at the case. I've always been pretty open that I feel who did it, Chris Revac. The investigation took us that way, and I felt that the information was there that could prove it. Unfortunately, Chris took his own life, so we couldn't get him here to say it or hold him accountable. And so our district attorney, Jonathan, just said, give me the entire case file, and I can review it and then offer an opinion. and a legal opinion. And so I did, and I give him a ton of credit because you can imagine how many reports were associated with that investigating, not just the sheriff's department, but Wisconsin Rapids Police Department, FBI, DCI, you name it. It was a huge file. And he went through everything, and then he put together a synopsis that basically said that if Chris Riback was alive today, he would charge him. And for what that does for us, it basically does legally, in a sense, close the case. Could there be some more information out there? I always will believe that Chris Riback's family knows some more information from his wife to other probably potential family members, but they don't want to say. That's up to them, but there's enough information there to say he's responsible for Deidre's death. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if there's more. There's a lot of other agencies that have reached out to us, looking for his DNA profile because there's also similar situations throughout the country that they don't have a suspect. And the Missouri County Sheriff's Department, their sheriff, Chris DeGase, he broke it. He's the one that contacted us, several years ago with what he was dealing with and arrested Chris Riback for a homicide there for Renee Williams. And then Chris took his own life in his jail. But there's, another, we did a 2020 special on Jody Husentrut. And ironically, Chris Riback was, linked to being in the area that she went missing. And, you look at the pattern of behavior on Riback, that's where, if I'm going to be a betting person, I'm going to bet that he's involved just because of his, his behavior, his violent behavior. But, big picture wise here, this is, very gratifying personally because it's an investigation that I was assigned to when I was an investigator when Deidre went missing, and then we found her out in the county. Then we become involved, and for me, it was a pretty big. Well, it's a huge investigation, but I got a taste of that teamwork approach on an investigation level as an investigator, working with Wisconsin Rapids PD at the time, us, and then it just kind of kept building from there because you have a homicide that you're working together on, trying to hold somebody accountable for. But once Riback was identified as our suspect, I always looked at with the family that you'd be open and upfront with them. And I laid it out. This is who I think did it. Here's going to be the challenges as we move forward, going through an investigation where the suspect or the person responsible took his life. But I always wanted to make sure that we were open with them, because they're always going to be grieving her death. And this doesn't bring her back. There's no really. This might be closure on an investigation level, but it's not for the family. It really isn't. It doesn't bring her back. In a sense, it might be some level of closure for, the investigation. But as I said, I felt that was very important, being part of the investigation, that we be open with the family as we move forward once Riback was identified as her suspect. So, again, huge thank you to Jonathan Barnett. I really appreciate the time, the effort that he put in, and then his conclusion. Mm-hmm. It personally means a lot. It means a lot to our community, and we're going to move forward. But I really appreciate what he did.
There are a few cases that had more attention in this area, especially here, for years and years and years. It's important to not only have this for the notes that you mentioned there, but as much as I think just even people who maybe don't know much about the situation but know of it or something, and having some kind of closure is important, but also some kind of. The judicial system has a number of purposes, one of them being accountability and how vital that is to our society, whether you know these individuals or not. But also, I think the understanding of we all want to see the bad guy get it in the end. Yeah. There's a need for that in society. There's a need to have closure, even if you don't know the people involved. This goes so far for our community on many, many levels, as well as I think a key part that you brought up of the person possibly doing more of these acts or something like that, or done some in the past. There's a lot of factors there. Appreciate the information on that, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing it up.
We got a little bit. It gets a little calmer now. It goes a little. I wanted to get that stuff out of the way, take care
I
of these things
appreciate it.
right away.
Yeah.
But there was some other stuff that I definitely wanted to talk to you about. There's a recent hearing that we were at that you wanted to touch on in Madison.
Yeah, down in Madison. We've been talking quite a bit about Bitcoin throughout the last several years, probably at least around 3, I believe, when we started getting the scams with the ATM Bitcoins that have been popping up in a lot of the convenience stores, which I'm going to tell people, if you're going to buy Bitcoin, don't do it through the ATMs. There's a 25% user fee. You could avoid a user fee and buy Bitcoin. So I think that the Bitcoin ATMs just unfortunately breathe a criminal element. Where if people are washing money or people are being scammed. And that's what started it for us. And, right when we started getting the complaints of elderly victims in Wood County, we had a pretty aggressive approach on how we recovered that money for our victims here. And since then, there's been a lot of challenges from the Bitcoin companies that we can't be releasing the money, which I think we should, but I can't put the county in a liability standpoint and understand that because the laws are starting to catch up. And what's happened recently, we're hoping we can get some bipartisan support moving forward with basically with just the ATMs, have a limit of a deposit per day. And a lot of states are doing around $2,000. And that's happening right now, but we need a bill to move forward through our political leaders down in Madison, on both sides of the aisle to get this passed through. I know it'll be a challenge because lobbyists are involved, and I've learned enough about that, and there's huge money involved with Bitcoin. Cryptocurrency is probably going to be the way of the future at some level, but that doesn't mean that we have to ignore issues of fraud and people being victimized and working together, setting these limitations. With where it's at now, I don't think that we have had, with the limitations right now, I don't think that we've had, in the last several months, anybody being victimized. So it's working now. We just need, that support down in Madison to move forward with that. But again, when you have lobbyists that are involved, and I understand that process because they're protecting their business, but for me, it's always going to be about being fair and being, trying to deal with the fraud end of it. And the ATMs, like I said, just I don't see the use for them because you can get Bitcoin somewhere. You don't have to pay 25%. But there's huge money out there, and that can complicate things. But we had one of our investigators. He was trying to get him to come today, but he will be on the show, I promise. Dan Barris, Scott Goldberg's already been on here talking about that. But our Badger Sheriff's Association, our lobbyists there had us come down to testify at an informational hearing. I believe it was the Senate, just to discuss, or the Assembly, I believe it was, like, hey, we need to, this is what's happening, and we need to have these limitations out there, and we'll see what happens. But Dan did a great job, kind of taking over for Scott, and got down there, and the more, we're going to keep talking about this. It's interesting, since being in this position, I think we've been down in Madison 4 or 5 times just testifying on different things, and that's kind of rewarding that people are listening to what we're doing up here, and then looking at potentially changing law because of situations like I just brought up.
There was a time where we would have never thought that, well, I can pay for a credit card anywhere. Like, everybody's accepting credit cards now. Everybody accepts debit cards. When we were kids, it was a cash society. It was very different. We've adapted, and we've gone from that to now it's the exact opposite, where, some places take cash, some don't, and everything. Societies change, societies grow. You may be right about cryptocurrency, that it might be a factor. I don't know that it'll ever be our one source, in part because, and I've done a lot of homework on this one, it's one of... Being honest with everybody, as I've always been with you, the first game I really learned was 3-card monte, and it was a hustle. It was a hustle. It was about making a couple of bucks off of somebody or something. But the thing about the hustle was you had a chance. We didn't do anything other than just trying to hide the card. The card was there, and for every person that lost, there was somebody that had a chance to win. This is cryptocurrency. This is the same hustle. It's no different. What we're talking about here is something that not only takes thousands and thousands and thousands of bits of power over our environment and kills our environment just for being able to create something that nobody asked for, but it's also a hustle. Like the only people making things off of this stuff is people that already have stuff. There's nobody, you have not heard of somebody, well, I had nothing, and then I got crypto, and now I'm a millionaire. No, you're not. No, it's a hustle. I mean, I know a hustle when I see one, and that's what this is. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do with their money, but if your gut's telling you something, chances are it's right, and to really lean into that. And to your point, if this is something you want to do, there are very, legal ways of going about it, very safe ways of going about it, encourage you to do that. And like you, we're going to be following this story and keeping an eye on it. It'll be interesting.
It will.
Speaking of Madison and some of the work down there with some of our politicians and everything, we have Representative Krugen this Friday, and something Scott and I have talked about quite a bit is the EpiPen bill that was going across. I wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, hats off to the Mueller family. I just can't imagine. We were down testifying to the assembly, with Scott, that he put it together and asked me to come down, and it was hard. Because three families, including the Muellers, talked about the loss of a child, and it was hard to follow that. And the only thing that I had brought up is, look at the impact it has on the first responders that go in and they recognize what's happening, but you can't do anything about it. The funding needs to be there, but the Mueller family locally, with their loss, what they've taken into has already saved a life, and people should be aware of that. They've done the fundraising, within a few short months to equip every law enforcement agency in Southwood County with EpiPens, and then with what Wisconsin Rapids P just saved somebody. And I believe Channel 7 did a nice story on it, and the video footage was. The body camera was released, and it just shows it. And so, to the Mueller family's credit, they saved somebody's life already. So I'm hoping that we get a funding source for me personally, as long as I'm sheriff, and we don't get a funding source from the state or the federal side of it. We're going to put in our budget when the EpiPens become expired, which is 18 months. We're going to make sure that we do it. It just makes sense. We've been carrying Narcan for quite some time, and this just makes sense for us, especially in rural areas. We respond to ambulance calls, and periodically we'll beat the ambulance. And if we recognize, based upon our training, that this is somebody that is having an allergic reaction, and we can save their life, it just makes sense to us.
Yeah, and very appreciated. Certainly the work everybody's put into this one.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people most people, if not everybody I've talked to about it, has been very encouraged by this. And, with this, the crypto conversation, some of these things, are we getting to them late? Maybe, but we're not getting them as late as we have with some other things. And I think that that's important to note, that we're working at, we're trying. Our heads are not buried in the sand with these topics and everything. These are all very noteworthy. Before I let you go, I had a couple other things I wanted to get into. One, we had one of our own become First Responder of the Year. I wanted to make sure to note them and highlight them.
Yeah, Scott Krug had reached out, and every year they do nominees for First Responder of the Year, and I nominated Mike Weiberg, which is just as not only he's just a good friend, but he's been a volunteer for Will County Rescue for decades. And I just had mentioned that, and then also just a couple of scenes that I went to recently, and he's there, crashes and coordinating the scene, cutting people out of a vehicle and that kind of stuff, and just a dedication to service, selfless service as a volunteer. So I nominate him, and I really appreciate Scott Krug selecting him. We're in the process of trying to figure out a date. Mike couldn't make it down to Madison when they kind of did a whole day of recognizing all first responders, but we'll get to that. I mean, Mike's a very humble person, but this is something that is very well deserved.
Yeah, he deserves the highlight. It'd be great to be able to do this with every one of our first responders and that. And certainly with being able to highlight him, we in some ways are able to highlight the position and what they do.
Sure. Absolutely.
Good to hear. Did you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we let you go?
Two quick things. Take a look at our Facebook page. We had a couple inmate programming things that happened in the last one. One, our partnership with Mid-State Technical College, that culinary program. They came in and a Serve Safe program was sponsored by them, and several inmates went through that and graduated through that. So once they get released, if that's going to be the field that they want to go into and work at a restaurant, that foundation has been laid. So as we've talked about the programming opportunities, hey, that's our first one. So our partnership with Mid-State just continues to grow, and that's something that once we got into the new facility, that opportunity was there. So to see that come full circle and happening, I'm very proud of that. And Three Bridges, again, with their recovery program, we had a graduation with several inmates that were suffering through addiction, and Three Bridges is awesome. I don't know what number classes is. It's several, but we had people graduate through their program as well. So just to highlight those inmate programming opportunities that people are taking advantage of in our facility is very noteworthy.
I think we talked about this last time too. I was looking at the things, and it's been about, I think, 7-8 years we've been doing this. And one of the earlier conversations we had was about stopping the revolving door.
Yep.
And putting a purpose to people when they do come out the other side of that, giving them something, being a taxpayer, being contributing to society. So many of these things, whether we're talking about Three Bridges or the Mid-State Partnership or any of these things, it's all coming together. All these things are happening. I'm not saying it happens for every individual, but it happens more times than not. And just the opportunity being there is such night and day difference from when I was young to now. It's so encouraging to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate, and that's where I wanted to wrap up was the Mid-State conversation. So we touched on everything. We got it. We got it all.
I think we did, just about.
Did want to make sure to mention before we wrap up, as you see me in the throwback shirt here and everything, our little station here, WFHR, is celebrating 85 years today. We went on the air this day in 1940. And I know that, like many of you guys and many people out there, we all have a memory or a personal love of this station, and certainly an appreciation to this community supporting us for all these years. So a big shout out to everybody who has been a guest on this show, who has sponsored or been a business put in this show, and certainly to the greatest listeners in radio. We appreciate you, and appreciate you, sir. Thanks for the time.
Right back at you. Just wait 100 years, we'll be right on the corner.
Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, it'll be, before you know it, Blake will be here. A shout out, of course, to our friends over at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media as well, doing amazing work. Be sure to head on over to YouTube, subscribe to their page, and keep up to date on all the things that they are doing. And Sean, if people had follow-up questions, they wanted to get a hold of you about anything, is there a way to reach you?
Yeah, we can do it through Facebook, or just give us a call, 715-421-8715.
Appreciate you, and we'll talk again next month.
Sounds like a plan.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us for another edition of WFHR's Rapids Report.